Ladies and gentlemen, prepare to be motivated by your host, Reverend John Wheeler! Now shut up! You shut up! Sit down! Shut up! Shut up!
Hey kids, it's your old pal, Uncle Reverend John Wheeler, aka Uncle Bad Touch. My usual co-host and or producer / human laugh track, Meredith, is not here this evening. She's not feeling well, and basically what happened was we all went to go see Harry Connick Jr. perform last night at the Armory, and the raw power of that performance, the oozing sexuality, the just deep rhythms and dank vibes and all that stuff proved overwhelming for Meredith, which I can understand, certainly. It was such a hurricane of a performance that, you know, whereas I sometimes am used to, mired in, often even, I don't know, kind of oblivious to at this point, due to almost a repetitive numbness to performances like that, but I forget the absolutely life-changing and hypnotic power that they can have. Now, you know, she does have a mild heart condition, and the irony being is that this was a fundraiser for, I don't know if it was Abbott Northwestern itself's cardiology department or a bigger heart. It was like Health 360, Heart Health 360, something like that. See, they opened the show by having like this Hamilton ripoff trio of, there was like a stand-up bass player guy who was not the guy playing bass for Harry Connick Jr. This other guy who was like mouth noising, and then this other dude that was doing that just never insufferable, never cringy, never boring, and never bad sort of slam poetry freestyle rap thing about uplifting stories about people who were going through their lives and something went wrong with their heart, and then they got it fixed and now they're alive. And you know what I mean. It's like a guy in a ponytail being like, and the thing about the cries of the mother of the daughter, you know that her heart needed to be made better. It wasn't like it could be just something you couldn't fix. You had to help it. Don't be a bunch of dicks. Yeah. And he's like so into it. And it's so like, look, we all love real rap, or maybe we don't. Maybe some of you don't like real rap. I will say I like real rap. And I also even like weird, fucked up, barely qualifies as actual rap. You know, like I like things like Ghost Main, but you know, I like things like Tupac, which these days is almost a little dated. I like some, Lil Xan has his moments, like all throughout, from fucking Digital Underground to, MGK had his moments before he got turned into an emo band for some reason, even though it's not 2007. Seems like an odd move. Whatever though, I like rap, but that, what do you want to call it? That youth center where it always smells like paint style, just like, and here's the thing about oppression, it's not an obsession. You're like, dude, great. And I don't know what that really did, but the problem with that performance is for as sort of lame and cringy and pointless as it was, it actually blew Harry Connick Jr. clean out of the water. Now, I also really enjoy, kind of jazz, trio, piano music. I listen to that a lot. I like old big band stuff. And there was not a single thing wrong with what anyone was doing. They had a brass section, and they'd come up to the front and take turns, and he did a little jazz piano rendition of It Had to Be You. It Had to Be You from When Harry Met Sally. I guess he did the soundtrack to that. I mean, I know that now because he stood up between every song and told a long story about either some baseball team that we're all supposed to respond positively to or something, or something where he was involved in a Hollywood movie, just so we don't forget who he was or something like that. But what I realized, and everyone realized it, that was interesting. It wasn't just snobby me. Meredith did realize this. Her older sister's like a big fan of his, wasn't, in the mood to come out, but I figured it out. That kind of music has this magic golden glow to it. Like we saw in Las Vegas, this thing, it's like a tribute band, but the band isn't like Motley Crue, it's the Rat Pack. Yeah, and a guy being Sammy Davis Jr. and a guy being Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra, and they pull out, like, they do all the same old jokes, except for occasionally they had to remind you, because some of those jokes were from 1960, and they had to say it. Like, I want you all to remember that in this room, it is still 1961. If you didn't like that joke, there's no internet to put it on yet. Your complaints. And that was cute. But it was very good. You were enraptured by it. And both times I was very drunk, so, I mean, it wasn't that. But I finally put it together. What it was Harry Connick Jr. is a really talented guy. And he's got a good voice. And he's a really good piano player. And every single dude in his band was clearly like a world-class jazz player type of guy. But you can really tell the difference when this is the first time they've done this. I'm not even certain that they'd rehearsed was the thing. It's like, and it's not that people are screwing up. They're too good. But they all had like iPad, you know, the music, the sheet music's in front of them, and that's just all they're doing. They're playing, and they're playing really good, but it's just this skeletal structure. It doesn't have that warm heartbeat of rhythm and blues and jazz that you can just sense when a bunch of the same dudes have been playing in the same smoky, dirty bar night after night after night after night. You can't really recreate that magic. You can by going on tour, but again, this was sort of like a one-off show where they just flew in, because again, it was some sort of heart fundraiser thing. Like my wife was, I think, by far at 28 the youngest person there, which I also have to say was a thing I really enjoyed about it. That we were probably the youngest and poorest people at this entire thing. You really learn to appreciate how orderly and pleasant and uncrowded and not jammed up a thing full of old rich people is. You know, they get a lot of hate on the internet. It's like, this is just a bunch of old rich white men showing off how much money they have. And yeah, it's like, I didn't have to wait in line. There wasn't a fucking fight. It's almost as if they have it all figured out with all of their rules and gatekeeping. It's not a goddamn monster truck rally, which is what most things turn into. It's like, even, you know, metal concerts can be okay, because even according to some friends of mine went out to see Ministry and Nine Inch Nails and stuff in Ohio, and they also saw something at the Metro in Chicago, and got to chatting with the staff there, and they're like, who are the worst fans and crowds as far as being disrespectful? Do you guys hate these out of control metal shows? And they're like, honestly, the worst people, and God, this surprises no one, but the worst fans are country. It's like the most fights, the most garbage everywhere. And you do have to kind of like look over your glasses, like, you know, we're including rap in this list, right? And I know better than this, but to some people's surprise, they're like, oh no, way less fights at that. The country shows are the full-on dumpster fires. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's not really music. It's just this sound for people who don't like music to go and pretend that they have any kind of soul, or they like to dance or be around other people. I don't know what it is. It's just this Pied Piper song for the soulless to gather and say the words in unison and just remember being in church as a kid, or I don't know what, except for now you're drunk and you're able to take a swing at somebody who is getting too close to you because they might be homosexual, and you might also be, but you can't have anyone knowing that, so you have to punch people, which is the straightest thing you can do, apparently. Also, having 4 kids with someone you divorced a long time ago. Yeah, it's the fun of it. A lot of pent-up rage at a country show. They didn't know where the machine was. But the reason I bring that up is we've had a really big weekend almost. I might not even get to, like, current events that are in the clickbait title and thumbnail of whatever this is going to be. And, you know it's going to have that. You know it's going to have something. Pardon my smoking a CBD cigarette. It calms me down. I'm an antsy guy. I don't like things like big crowds and standing around or whatever. It isn't fun. Like, these people would always be like, why don't you come to this EDM festival? It's like, I don't want to be in a tent in the wilderness, really. Like, I hate that. I mean, I get it in theory, and I've done it. It's, beautiful or whatever. But I really don't want to be in a tent and shit in a hole in the ground. And also I have to wait in line to shit in a hole in the ground. Like, whatever good there is of camping, it has a lot to do with the fact that when you do have to, go pee in the woods, you don't have to wait behind 60 other people to do it. If we're at an EDM festival, that is what you get to do. You don't purify water at a stream, you pay $60 for a bottle of water at a tent. And yeah, so I don't like those kinds of things at all. But earlier in the day, before we went to the armory for a good cause. Is he Harry Connick Jr. with a bunch of old dudes in suits, which, by the way, I enjoyed. I was so in my element, and my parents were there and stuff. And I think my mom said something about like, this must be boring to John. It's like, if I looked irritated, it wasn't boredom. It was that I could kind of tell that it was really phoned in, but I couldn't tell that that's what it was. So I was just sitting there trying to figure it out. I love that kind of music. I love me. I have machinations of being a little hobby jazz piano player. Like, I'm more of an electronic music producer and like live yelly screamy guy. But if I was pretending to be cooler than that, it would have something to do with the jazz piano. I don't know what. I got my nice old school, probably borderline priceless Kurzweil upstairs for a full 88. And, I love to tickle the ivories. But no, I wasn't bored. I was trying to figure out what I was looking at, for one thing. And for another thing, I had been to the Renaissance Festival earlier, and it was the worst thing in the world. And here's why. It's too popular. And I don't mean like, oh, there's a bunch of, like when weird indie bands get big, everyone's like, nah, I found it first. Like, no, I know I didn't find the Renaissance Festival first. I mean, in a way I did, because I was talking to some Gen Z kids that were really stressed out in the giant line to the porta potties or whatever. They were kind of like, I don't know, man, this is just kind of getting to me. I'm like, why it's getting to you? It's too crowded and it's stupid. And also it's not, like, I was like, look, I'll level with you. I'm 42 years. He was wearing a kilt and had a sword. Whatever. You do what you do there. But, yeah, I've been there in the 80s. There would have been like one other person wandering over towards the porta potties. Like, it would just be this, yeah, there's people there. But this was like, it's getting to those, like, I'm done going to the state fair forever levels, because you're just in love with the idea of it. Like, the state fair, you're like, there's corn dogs and there's things. And all it is a line. It's walking sideways through a sea of people and having people spill things on you to go, like, stand on your tiptoes to go look at a thing you used to be able to get into in under 2 hours. And it's just horrible. Like, there's just families everywhere. And, that's fine. But it's like, the Renaissance Festival is a little bit dorky, and when you can't, get to where the goddamn beer is because there's too many strollers everywhere, it's like, yeah, is this cool anymore? Or is this just, has like Instagram and TikTok and social media and everybody's bizarre obsession with, nerd culture is just mainstream completely now, and like, oh, it's cool, there'll be elves there and stuff. It's just a line to the bathroom. That's all it is. Your imagination and the internet are telling you that there's going to be like swords and Game of Thrones and dragons and things like that. And that's there somewhere, but you're hungry and you have to take a whiz and you got to pick between which one of those things you want to wait an hour to fix. Also, it took, I think I would live about, like in the middle of the night on a weekday or something to get down to those grounds. It might be 15, 20 minutes in the car, something like that. No one's really in the way. It was 2.5 hours from the driveway to the mismanaged, overflowing, shitty, scary parking lot that they had going. We actually cut the line to get inside. Like, we walked the 10 miles from where the car is parked. We're in the itchy lot to get to the actual main event or whatever. And then there is like a line, like fucking Avenged Sevenfold's playing for free or something. That one, me and Alexa just kind of walked up to the front and just cut in line. And at that point, nobody noticed. Because again, there'd be like a group of people. It's like passing like a semi in a snowstorm. They have to go slow, so you can always get in front of them. There's like a group of people with strollers caught in the mud, just trying to figure out how this is so difficult, how their choices are not panning out. So there'd be this big, long, open thing. They were too concerned with not losing their babies in a quagmire. And we just kind of walked up. And then I think we realized, too, that huge line was the ticket line. Like, that many people didn't think to buy tickets ahead of time. And that's also wild, as an aside. The amount of times that, you know, my wife and I in particular will make a decision to do something. You know, we got like pre-approved for all the financing when we went house shopping. The praise that was heaped on us by the realtors and appraisers and things, oh, that's smart. That's a good idea. Like, doesn't everyone just do that? And they're like, no, which is how we got this place. Like, it got way more. It got like 13 goddamn fucking offers, and ours wasn't even the highest. But we got it because we could close the fastest, because literally not one of those other people had actually been like, oh shit, we should see what kind of financing we can get before we look. And I think it always bothered me, like with cars and things. Like, I would always like secure a loan, and then, I mean, I've just been buying my cars cash. I mean, I'm not buying new cars cash, but like, really good shape, previously owned vehicles for whatever, because, you know, there's interest on loans. It costs you more over time. It's a bad idea. New cars, you know, they devalue once you go. They're a bad investment. I mean, you might need one because you don't want the trouble of having to occasionally fix a car, but I don't know. I've made my choices. But anyway, yeah, we bought our tickets ahead of time. Again, it's like, oh, good idea. You guys can just come right this way. I thought, cool. I would have followed the signs telling me what to do if there were any. God's sake. But yeah, then we cut the line, we get in there, it's just that ocean of people. And, you know, it's like, the wife is starving to death because, you know, and me too, I'm uncomfortable. I was like, I'll just wear my sword on my back apparatus I had in the car because, you know, yeah, it should take 20 minutes. The thing is saying like 49 because, yeah, there's going to be traffic, but it did not say 2.5 hours. So I was in a stress position that they used to, like, interrogate prisoners in, like, Russia for 2 hours or whatever. So I was, like, in a pretty bad mood. And, you know, she takes other people's driving as a personal slight against her every single time. And that can weigh on one's psyche, I know. You know, so the vibrations in the car were, you know, they get that fear and loathing level of, like, is there no communication in here? Are we starting to be drawn down to the level of dumb beasts? Yeah, so it's like, I'm just completely at the end of my rope before we start the long walk to stand in line to get in. And that's just where, and then, like, we were there for a while. It took a million years to get out. Like, all of this shit, and it's like, and also, what is it? It's like, there's mead, but I can just go buy that. You know, there's meaderies around here. There's a meadery not even that far. There's one in White Bear Lake, where some friends of mine live. And we can just go buy that mead from there, and it's like, there's shows, but then they're so crowded, you're at these, like, outskirts, and, like, some friends of ours do aerials there, the Justice of Dragons and Angela. Angela's supposed to come on the podcast, even though we don't really have guests. Anyone that's a friend that really wants to do it. By the way, if I met you in high school and then have only seen you on the internet since then, like, no, you're not coming in my house. I mean, God bless you if you're watching this, but no. I was letting everybody know that's a broad enough statement. And there's enough people involved where I can say that without making it personal. I get a lot of direct messages, and, you know, send them to me. But what I'd rather you would do is, you know, if you want to communicate with me, do it under the YouTube video so that it gets pushed and gets more views. Also, like and subscribe. But, yeah, the Renaissance Festival is done. And if you're working there, or if you run anything that big, fuck you. But, you know, if you work there and you're like, wow, we're making more money than ever. It's like, well, of course, it's reaching that critical mass where it's so popular it's not fun to go to. But the weird thing is, that doesn't dissuade anyone from going. Like, have you noticed that it's a fascinating thing that stuff will just get so big that it's not like, okay, the very next time, yeah, you'd be like, oh, it'll just get more and more popular. Maybe it'll slowly wane. In my mind, what should happen is that last time everyone goes and it's that much of a crowded nightmare, the next time should have, like, the 3 people who just hadn't heard of it before at it, and that's it. Like, everyone be like, that sucked. But apparently that doesn't bother everybody. And the other happy coincidence with all that is, I'm going to go ahead and say this, and this is not based on any kind of, you know, this is not based on culture or race or gender identity. It's just based on the quality of people in general. Across the board, they can look like anybody. That doesn't matter. But it is a low-quality person that goes to a fucking quagmire bullshit thing like that. Like, just a crowded, it's not even worth it, just sweaty, awful, inconvenient, uncomfortable thing, and just goes, this is great! Like, it's totally worth it. We saw someone with elf ears. Like, yeah, after 3 hours of trying to get in and spending $500,000. And again, I don't care if it's expensive. I wish it was more expensive. That would probably help. And I know that seems mean and classist or something, but, you know, I went to the Heart fundraiser thing with a, jazz quartet, and again, probably the youngest and poorest person there at 42, and fucking, yeah, it was just, like I was saying, it was orderly, it was nice, there was nothing on the floor, it was like, oh, I'm sorry, my kid sneezed in your food, none of that. It was just a stale, stiff, stodgy, boring, old world thing, but you know what? I would literally do that again just for the convenience. Just because it was like you could just talk to people and tip your hat to the people in the street rather than screaming and swearing at them. Like, I am just not interested in everybody's just crinkled up beer can diaper bag fuck fiesta, no matter what it used to be. No matter whether it used to be the state fair, it used to be like, I saw Metallica and they were in like First Ave. Yeah, now it's in the US Bank Stadium. It is too much. That's the other thing. We went to go see Rammstein. There's 40,000 people there. It's like a giant metal concert in a giant, stadium for football and all this stuff. And it was like, it took us like a little while to get out of there, but it was like, we walked right in and went and stood on the floor, and I just grabbed a couple of beers and threw my beers in the trash, or the cans in the trash, when I was done. It was fine. It just wasn't like, and I know that it's like people of all ages and everybody likes Rammstein, but it just doesn't reach the lows. Or maybe it's the $150 ticket. Whatever it is, it's like, it certainly wasn't like the Renaissance Festival, which is just like, at this point, it's turning into an open air Walmart. It's like, yeah, there's some cool people there, but they looked stressed out. Again, these hip, attractive Gen Z kids by the bathroom were literally like struggling to square their experience. They were like, why is this giving me so much anxiety? And I understand, some people are like, oh, kids are so, everyone's got anxiety. It's like, no, if you don't feel anxiety in that situation, you're a serial killer. Like, or just someone without a brain. I don't know, but they were like having the correct and real feelings that you should absolutely get for waiting an hour to go to the bathroom at something. And they're like, yeah, but I feel like we should be having fun. They were doing that thing. When you're younger, you're like, I have to go out. I have to be, or I'm a loser if I'm not going out to the dance club and experiencing things and whatever all the time. And I know you have to, because you don't get to quit doing things until like after you've done them. It's not like I never did things. I've just done them all. And some of the repeat ones, again, have just turned into these monster truck rally, awful Trump crowded fucking bullshit things. Because, yeah, too, it's like it just used to be all nerds in costumes. There's literally like frat kids going in and looking at the leather hats being like, this one is gay. And everyone's just kind of staring at him. And yeah, that wasn't such a thing years ago, but it's just the zombie pub crawl. Everybody remember that shit? It used to be this thing where people actually like would dress up, and then it just turned into a frat house with everyone in the fucking universe at it, and they just put a little bit of blood on their FU t-shirt or whatever, and Fargo, and be like, oh, we're zombies, and they just crowd into this thing. Just cram on into it because everyone's heard of it. It caught on fire on social media. The infrastructure to support that amount of people, you just have to move. And what I was going to say is, friends of mine who work there and make money, you're going to keep making money. I can bitch about this and tell everyone not to go, all 12 people that'll listen to this, all I want. And it doesn't matter, because either whoever's listening is already probably done going to it. But all that happens is the crowds won't get smaller. They'll just get worse. Like, not worse, bigger. They'll just be like grodier and grodier people that don't mind going to something that has absolutely no point to it anymore, is so crowded it's not even any fun. Because those are the only events they ever go to. They don't know any other version of going out. That's just what it is. You just show up with like fucking Miller Lights in the back of your pickup truck, which is fine. I enjoy, that. But that should just be like some of the people that are at some of the things, not like every last thing is a pickup truck full of beer and just people being like, what the hell's going on? And, like it's a Leonard Skinner concert or some shit like that. I feel like everyone like that is okay with going to these nightmare events because they've never been to like a concert. And I'm not saying this is necessarily great, but they've never been to a concert with 20 people at it because they've never heard, like, they don't understand that musicians, for example, struggle because they've only ever seen things the size of Garth Brooks. You know what I mean? Like, they've never seen a punk show with 30 people, but there could have been like 200 people in there, but there's 30. They don't go to that because they don't hear about things like that. They only hear about shit when it's absolutely at its critical mass. because they're not, I think I'm figuring something out here. They're just uncultured and unconnected to the point where they only know. So, but it's like you can't just stay home because of the same people that threaten people with AR-15s because they couldn't go to TGI Fridays anymore during the whole pandemic thing, which I admit, you know, I don't know if closing everything really solved anything or just mostly made stuff crazier and worse. Whatever, it's in the rearview mirror now. And when it happens again in 5 years, I'm sure we will prove that we have not learned our lesson whatsoever. But yeah, they're like, I want to go to this horrible crowded thing with a mechanical bull in the middle where the service sucks and you can't hear yourself think. And that's just what going out is. And since you have to go out, you go out. And so, yeah, they'll go and watch your thing where you juggle fire and stuff. You'll be there. I just won't be there. And no one you really want to be around will be there. But that's the thing. It's just a business now anyway. It's not necessarily supposed to be that. I mean, when you're an artist, you fucking struggle. And it's like, that is at the heart, sort of, when people are being honest when they're talking about selling out. Some people are just being bitter and bitchy at their successful peers. But, yeah, some of selling out is you kind of want to interact with your fans at a certain point, and you're like, well, there's lots of them now, and there's literally 0 ones that I'd ever want to talk to. Hypothetically, let's say you're like Imagine Dragons or something, and you're like, remember when being in a rock band was cool because you'd meet fun, interesting people, and now it's just people who like the Maroon 5 or whatever, and it's like, yep, that's that. And it's like you got into music because you had taste and you understood things. So of course you liked other people to have taste and be interesting, but now you're making stuff that's just so watered down that you're making millions of dollars because people are showing up and they're like, I like this music, and you're like, I hate you for liking this music. I slowly started, getting praise and incentivized as it nudged its way towards mediocrity. And then you show up and you're like, I fucking love this. This is good. And you're like, I knew this was bad when I made it, but I'm stuck. Like, I don't want to go from the tour bus back down to a van. We're almost to a private jet. And then you have to suffer these people. And you're like, thanks, man. Thanks so much. Thanks for your support from the beginning. No, I just heard about it. Like, well, thanks for coming out and buying a shirt for every single one of your kids. Like, oh, they like it too. I mean, they like anything, but this is a fun time. And yeah, you're going to resent those people. You hate them. You wish they'd leave, but then somehow not take their money with them. And, they're not frugal. They're not smart. That whole thing where people say that ignorance is bliss is kind of a misnomer. It's just more that people don't realize they're ruining their own lives. Like, you're like, I wish I was as stupid as that guy. He doesn't even understand the problems of the world. No, he doesn't understand why he's always broke, even though he buys 100 lottery tickets a week, because he doesn't see the connection there at all. He just thinks it's, I don't know, Mexicans or liberals or something. God knows what. He thinks whatever the TV tells him to think, which is, usually something like that. And yeah, it's just always like, I can't just get it. It's like the whole universe hates me. And it's like, he's picking fights with his neighbor and then he steps in dog shit. It's just like, well, maybe don't do that. Like, it just came out of nowhere. Now, yeah, life seems actually really scary and hard when you're too stupid to realize that everything you do just boomerangs back and blows up in your face. It's unpleasant. Like, being smart can be really frustrating, but at the very least, you can sort of meticulously nudge and twist away at your problems until you're like, okay, I'm realizing now that my problem in this category is that I keep having to do this, but it's because I can't afford to do it the better way. So I need to figure out how to either reallocate my finances or make more money. And how do I do that? It's like, well, I keep just moving laterally. It's like, maybe I need to learn a new skill, but college is expensive. Use YouTube, figure it out. It's just, there's a lot of tax on being dumb, and the weird thing is the more you get taxed for being dumb, the dumber you have to be to fall for that, to the point where you don't realize that's what's happening, so you just think the whole world is basically cheating you or whatever. Which, oddly enough, it actually is. You just don't understand how or why. And you're shocked every time you hear about, oh, this only happened because someone was trying to make money. Again, like the Renaissance Festival. They should move it, or maybe make 2 of them, or maybe they should just quit doing it, or I don't fucking know. Or have it open on weekdays, thin it out a bit, but that doesn't, give you the maximized ROI. You only have to hire employees for the weekends, and then it's just overloaded and out of control, and you just rake in money, and then you just shut it all down for a few days. It's like, they already own the land. Those buildings are already there. I don't understand how it works. I don't know if it's local. I know it travels, and it's like the same thing. But the people I know who are like vendors and work in it, they're local. So what's traveling? The guy that dresses up as the king? I think don't understand the Renaissance Festival at all. Like, you know, it doesn't go on everywhere all the time in the same time of year like other places. So it's like this traveling thing where all the buildings and the land are all set up already all the time. It happens for like a month out of the year or something like that. But everybody that's involved in it is just, I know half the people there. They're just from here. So who's traveling around with this thing? Apparently there's characters and I don't know. You don't see them because, again, everything's so fucking crowded. You can't tell what's going on. But yeah, there's no sense in scaling anything back or spending the money to expand or whatever when you're just making money and people are just going to show up anyway. It doesn't matter whether or not I'm there. It just matters that it's jammed full of people who do not know how to budget whatsoever. And it is one of those poor people experiences. You know, it's like, because people are like, well, no, what are you talking about? It's kind of expensive. I'm like, no, it's exactly because, see, is it more expensive than sitting at home? Yeah, everything is. But is it more expensive than like a trip to the Bahamas and summering in the Hamptons? It's way less expensive than that. That's the whole point. If you actually made as much money as we should be making, even on the lower rungs of society, where minimum wage would be like $30 an hour, you know, if it kept up with inflation for the last 100 years, you know, yeah, you'd be going to like the Napa Valley for vacation, even if you were like working in a factory. But you can't afford that, so all you can afford is booze, knickknacks, somewhere to go that's fun for the whole family, so you don't need a babysitter, like sweet candy, donuts. Like, I get a little treat every day. My trip to the Bahamas is an extra donut. But that's poor people's shit. And yeah, I come from not wealth, I'll tell you that. And I've like finally got to where I'm treading water. I am not one to talk about being poor, but at the very least, I kind of kept myself out of trouble by only really caring about things that matter. I'm like, you know, you spend enough money on a lot of little things, it tends to evaporate pretty quick. And I'm like, should my treat be like Mountain Dew? It's like, I should just stop buying this every day. And then lo and behold, I lost a bunch of weight. It's all bad for you and it's all terrible. Unfortunately, me saying that, according to, I saw, this was on other podcasts and stuff, and it's been in the news, and I just really have to say, I want to weigh in, and if you haven't heard this, by the way, go look it up. So there's this lady who is I don't know, like a nutritionist or something, and they released this video for the LA school district, so you already know, this has nothing to do with no one that's listening to this lives anywhere near Los Angeles. My friends that moved there resent me for being right about how big of a mistake it was. So, you know, whatever. And I think a lot of them don't have kids, because if you can't afford them here, you definitely can't afford them there. But, yeah. No, they released this thing, and this lady, basically, like, there's this little skit, and I guess I probably could have downloaded it and put it on here, but that's work, and fuck that. If Meredith was here, part of her job is to, when I almost don't do something, it's encouraging me to go ahead and do it. Like, no, you should... It's funny, you should do it. People should see this. It's ridiculous. And I'd be like, you're right, Meredith. But again, she was just blown away by the pure machismo of Harry Connick Jr. and a bunch of old people at a fundraiser thing that I was waiting for the Danny DeVito penguin to break into at any second, which would have been pretty scary. But then we would have gotten to meet Batman, and that would have been fun. The real Batman, not the morbidly obese ones wandering around the Renaissance Festival earlier. But no, anyway, so this lady was pushing this thing, and it was weird. Like, people kind of smelled a rat right away, you know? Like, I'm done with this whole, I mean, again, I'm a lefty, progressive, Bernie Sanders-y liberal guy, but just because I draw the line between me and just total identity politics, wangdoodles, like, yeah, that doesn't mean I'm fucking Hitler. It's like, I want everybody to have health care and maybe unionize, and you know what I mean? The good old-fashioned liberal stuff where everybody gets to be who they want to be and live how they want to live, and they get paid a fair wage, and they don't just die of cancer that, you know, because the medicine would have been $5, but they jacked it up to $12 million. Like, yeah, no, I don't, like, that's where I am on things. But the whole, like, so anyway, yeah, they're basically what this lady was saying was that it's kind of like part of the whole racist power structure to judge food as good or bad. And the video is amazing. Like, she literally has a bowl of, or I think it's two actors that she kind of has, these TikTok-y people. Like, one has like a bowl of donuts, and the other one's like, you're not going to eat a bowl of donuts for, you know, breakfast. That's not good for you. That's bad. She's like, what do you mean it's bad? Is it spoiled? Is it poison? Is it like something other weird? She's like, well, no. And then they're like, oh, you were judging my food choices based on, I don't know, the patriarchy. It's one of those things. And the other thing is, it's very nebulous as to whether they're saying it's racist or the patriarchy. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason it's so blurry. And it is because the lady putting this out, that's like working for the school district or like whatever, or connected to it somehow, saying kind of this smeary, like, oh, it's fat phobic, but also like it's, what was it? It was artificial standards of health. Because, the big thing is artificial standards of beauty, and people get mad at you and you don't get a boner for something that makes you sick looking at it. And oh, yeah, I'm sorry. But, whatever. You could be like, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Like, there's cars that are beautiful that no one wants to fuck, or probably a few weirdos do. But, there's also people who weigh as much as a car. And maybe in some, how the puppeteer work of, the LucasArts and Jabba the Hutt. Yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful work, but you don't really want to look like that or weigh as much as a car or whatever. Like, it's, yeah, fine. There's some sort of abstract beauty in everything, and people shouldn't be discriminated against, which I agree. Like, you shouldn't, if you see someone in a rascal scooter, that's too fat to walk, like, don't throw crap at them and be like, fuck you, fatty. I mean, if they're wearing if they're wearing a particularly political t-shirt and hat, maybe they've earned it, but attack that. Go knock their hat off. They can't chase you. But you don't really got to call them fat. That's mean. I mean, I can. Because I'm just basically fishing for negative attention. Like, I'm waiting for the day that someone that was kind of watching a few of these, instead of just quietly unsubscribing, finally just writes this scathing, pointless, circular, misspelled diatribe so I can read it on the air and just laugh at them. But I think almost everybody, even if they don't like me, knows that that's where that's going. And as much as everyone on the internet wants attention, they don't want that actual John Wheeler mirror held up to what they have to say that really picks, like, stuff that they didn't realize that they were doing that now they do realize, and they know that I know, and now all 11 other people left watching this know. No one wants to go through that. That's psychologically damaging. They just want the attention of the comment being seen and hoping it ruins my day, instead of making it better and being turned into content that might get more people to watch. So no one's going to fall for that, unfortunately. But again, that's probably because they're fat. Yeah, see? Haha. Anyhow, the irony, the reason that the lady pushing, it's called food neutrality or whatever. The reason that it's kind of like, so what is it? Is it fascist? Is it beauty standards? Artificial standards of health is insane, because health is like, kind of across the board. Like, if you have an animal and they're like, this animal is overweight, you're like a bad pet owner. You're like, we have to do something. Like, we have to rehabilitate this poor animal we found. They were just feeding it. It was like a dog that only ate like M&Ms and cupcakes, and it weighs like 200 pounds, but it's like a labradoodle, and it can barely move. And the people then are always like, well, it's beautiful. Like, no, they don't do that then. They're like, oh my God, you should go to jail for hurting an animal. How could you do that? I mean, it's different when I do it, like that, which it isn't. Like, you're like, oh, look at that. You feed them a high-protein, lean, healthy diet, and they're like, oh, their coat's all shiny, and they give them vitamins and stuff, and they're like lithe and muscular and can run through the yard and leap over the fences and chase the squirrels and eviscerate them. Yeah. You're like, well, that's good. And it's like, well, you can't do that. It's like, well, it's not everybody is built like that. But anyway, yeah, it's a ridiculous, stupid movement filled with stupid, ugly, awful people. But this lady wasn't even being honest with it, okay? The second part of the news story, because there was backlash. I mean, like, Michelle Obama, like, she is a woman of color, and an important and an intelligent one in a position of power, like, made her first lady kind of, they kind of pick a thing. Hers was like making sure kids are healthier with food in school, because obesity is a gigantic problem in this country. I mean, figuratively and literally. And so it's like, and she was just doing that a few years ago. We liked that about her. That was one of those things where it's like, yeah, all politicians and everybody, they're all terrible. But I'm like, well, that's kind of like a good cause, though. That's worth looking into. That's worth like, hey, maybe these insulin companies won't be able to charge so much if their customer base isn't just so direly sick and huge and desperate and all that, where it's like, okay, we can't rip people off as bad because they don't need this as bad because they're generally in better health, so it's not required. Some people genetically are going to need it, but whatever. It didn't get focused on into this growth. Insulin turned into a monster truck rally like the goddamn State Fair and the Renaissance Festival and everything else because it got too popular. See, that's the problem. And it's just that whole movement in general is very silly and destructive. The whole "let's just be fat, who cares" movement. I mean, yeah, don't judge people who are like working out and eating is good, but they're a little paunchy. It's like that's not their fault. They're trying, like me. But yeah, it's like I'm 400 pounds on purpose because that's good. You should be put on a watch list where you're denied end of life care. It's like, no, we're not paying for this. We're not insuring you. Like, yeah, you just go ahead and be beautiful until you have a coronary at 37 years old. That's fine. No, it's terrible. It's a bad thing. And so, but this lady again had hijacked this already ridiculous. I've seen some good movements get hijacked. Environmentalism. There's a lot of things that are like, hey, this is positive and you ruined it. This was bad in the first place, but it also got hijacked. They all got mad, like the parent-teachers unions and other things, because they realized she worked for, and you're already on the internet, just look it up, but she worked for like basically Nabisco or Chips Ahoy or some junk food manufacturing company. And if that isn't the symbol for exactly how every last thing in this country, maybe on this planet, has ever worked since money was invented, is a lady that works for a junk food company hijacking some kind of social movement because everyone's getting more health conscious now and trying to like use that language, I guess the woke, whatever, that word's worn out, but use that language and that rhetoric and all that stuff to go, hey, if you're telling me that I shouldn't eat a bowl of donuts for breakfast instead of like salad or something, or I shouldn't intermittent fast, I should just wake up and start eating pizza the minute my eyes open. Yeah, you're racist or transphobic or fucking whatever it is. And again, she was kind of throwing everything at the wall there. And the thing to take away from this story is it's crashed and burned. Like, it got made fun of. She got exposed like right away. But don't hold that up as some kind of weird exception. Just because it got caught right away doesn't mean that, it's always like that. Like, it's always obviously a scam right away. Everything is a scam. A lot of things, I don't just pick anything. It doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on. Even if you're on the one I'm generally on. Actually, right now in the current climate, I think this is affecting y'all more than just about anybody. Because I think they kind of figured something out. They were like, yeah, the Trump thing got kind of scary with that whole brainwashing exercise. And it's like, yeah, those people, we can always get them to do what we want. Maybe let's like aim a little like lower and less intense. Like, how do we get the people who generally are smarter than that or more on the right side of the history? How do we get them? And I will not be very specific about this, but there is probably some stuff that has become a very focused on an important thing in the last 5 years that you believed your very core. That was started by somebody who wants nothing but bad things for you, but also doesn't care about that nearly as much as they just want money. And I mean in that way where, like, segregation was obviously bad, but where it came from, there's a lot of people that were like, yeah, it's real important that we have this. And it just turns out that that was being lobbied by people who made drinking fountains and toilets so they could sell twice as many. Yeah, no, that's right. And it's like, it got proven to be bad, right? Like, we kind of were like, we can't do that anymore. And it never really came out, that part of it. So that's how well hidden, like, even when something is like, we're getting rid of this now, this is overturned, this is bad, we're not going to do things like this, it's not good to have segregation, it's not good to have whites only and blacks only drinking fountains. But even when that got torn down, nowhere in the flames and wreckage of that, falling apart and us, becoming slightly more reasonable, did anyone go, and also, by the way, this was being funded by people who were just trying to sell more drinking fountains. Like, even when something is exposed as terrible, that part of it, the real part of it that's actually behind everything, like got milk, like all this stuff, like the whole thing where like bread's the biggest part of the food pyramid. So you should be eating the white bread more than meat and poultry. That's not good for you. Yeah, it's just the bread companies had the most money and lobbied the government the most to teach kids in school. The food pyramid is basically built by aliens. And the one in Vegas, but not Egypt. That was actually just people. But yeah, if you're like, no, it's very important that I'm referred to as this and that. It's like, be careful, because that might have been made by someone who wants to discredit you so that this other agenda can get pushed and they can make a bunch of money off it or some shit. Just watch it. Especially if you start yelling at other people. Like if obviously COVID was a problem. I caught it. It was real nasty. And I imagine if you already have stage 4 cancer and you're 90 years old, yeah, that might put you over the edge and kill you. For absolutely sure. We had to be real careful about it. We didn't understand it, but all the people that are like, I'm just going to wear a mask in my own house for the rest of my life. It's like, yeah, who told them to do that? Because they didn't come up with that idea on their own. Someone out there, someone who maybe invested in making something that suddenly, like, was very much in demand and suddenly isn't anymore. Yeah, they might have been like, people need to keep wearing these things. We built new factories, for Christ's sake. People are going to lose their jobs. Like, just convince them to wear them in their car where they're waiting for the bus, and just to never stop. And that anyone that thinks this is anything less than the movie The Stand is a bad person who's part of the patriarchy or whatever, just like the fucking food neutrality thing. Yeah, beware. But of course, it's not my side of the fence either. It's just more clear. Like on last episode, we talked about all like the Trump merchandise. It's like, that's hilarious. They don't even hide it. Like, we're just destroying democracy so we can sell merch. Like, there's almost something kind of amazing about the, like, okay, on our side, you really have to trick us into doing shit to sell shit, right? Okay. And at least that we're all stupid, but at least we're a little less stupid because, it's like, it takes work. You really got to twist and fuck with things to try to sell Chips Ahoy to school kids for breakfast and undo everything Michelle Obama, most of the rest of the country's done for the last 20 years. Like, that takes balls, and if that had worked, that would have been an amazing sucker punch. But then on the other side of the fence, it's like, buy this thing or you're liberal. Like, I better buy 12. It's like, no, I don't need it. That's not subliminal messaging. That's like superliminal messaging where you just lean out the window like, hey, you better be part of this now. Better figure out what's going on. Like, I'll take 10 of those hats. I'd be like, I want people to think that I'm the one that knows what's going on. Yeah, it's so much easier. Now, none of it should work at all if we were actually as advanced of a species as we're touted as, but who touts that? Us. Our own brains. The organ that named itself. You know who was food neutral, though? It doesn't get a lot of credit for this. At least according to the Netflix series that I and everyone am watching. Is Jeffrey Dahmer. And by the way, yeah, if it's part of the patriarchy, if it's white supremacy to say, hey, don't tell me to not eat a bowl of donuts for breakfast or you're like racist. So like, at that point, where does it end? Like, who says that I shouldn't have a Bloody Mary for breakfast before I go to work? Like, is that any different from a salad? It has salad in it. And, as long as I'm doing that, why not plop a couple of Percocets in there? Fuck the Bloody Mary. I'll just have a Manhattan in the morning. It's got a cherry in it. It's a little treat. I don't have to earn that. I don't have to go, hey, I'm a successful guy. No, I got a part-time job in a warehouse and I am going to have a fucking whiskey Dayquil with a cocaine rim before I go in there every morning. And listen, if that causes me to take a swing at my manager and drive the forklift into a wall and steal it and escape and sell the parts of it for the meth that I've decided to eat instead of salad, because don't judge my food choices. Yeah, you're a racist. Don't do that. The only difference between eating a salad and eating Percocets and whiskey is like society's view of it, man. Like, it's, people have this agenda about health. It's like, no, yeah, it's just, you could put literally anything in your mouth and anything in your body, and it's the only difference between those things is how other people make you feel about it. That's how reality works. I do love that kind of no one fell for it, but I really wanted to roll in the, like, to me, it is more important that everything is a scam. Like, that's more the thrust of this strangely not very motivational podcast. Although, when you learn everything's a scam, it's sort of easier to work around it. And then maybe that'll motivate you to be more successful. You'll be like, wait a minute, I could start my own scam. I could be at the top of a pyramid scheme rather than the bottom for once. And you go get him, Tiger. But yeah, Jeffrey Dahmer, I'm just going to take this the Netflix series as sacrosanct truth, because it actually seems really real. Like, people have all these, like, the victims don't like when there's movies about crime. Well, yeah, Well, your family already got eaten. Is it just a big problem that there's a triggering TV show about it? I mean, I do understand that, but I mean, fuck, plenty of people like just disappeared and the murders never are on TV. I don't know. Be happy. Everyone wants their little moment in the limelight, and you got yours. Why be bitter? But yeah, in the movie, in the thing, they catch Jeffrey Dahmer. And again, I believe it's accurate just because of how awkward it is. Like, everyone's like, it's putting him in this, like, shining light of, like, no, they really do a good job of showing that these guys, all of these serial killer guys, they just got lucky and kind of just the fact that everything, if anything, they're just like a big example of how broken the entire system is, especially the Jeffrey Dahmer one. Like, the neighbors would be like, people keep disappearing in there. Also, this guy's a real creep. Also, it smells like rotting bodies. Also, half dead people that aren't all the way dead yet keep getting out, and the police just bring him back. And he's like, oh, sorry, that's my boyfriend. We're doing gay stuff. But yeah, that was that guy. He had a GPA in high school of like a 1. The guy's IQ is a goddamn letter. Like, it was just sloppy, shitty. Everyone just gives you the benefit of the doubt or whatever. But so, yeah, and then he just gets caught because he doesn't know what he's doing. He's just randomly drilling holes in people's skulls. There was no YouTube to be like, how do you actually lobotomize a sex slave? Like, no, I'm sure there's 50 videos about that right now that you can go watch after this one's over, of course. And if you find it, leave a link in the comments so we can all watch it together on the next episode. But I'm taking this movie as kind of an accurate portrayal, right? Which means that the best thing about Jeffrey Dahmer is, at the very least, is he was food neutral. A lot of people were like, oh, he specifically targeted black people. But there was Native Americans. There was Asians. There was a big thing about that. There was white dudes. There was a couple of those. I mean, everybody was gay, but, that's how he lured them in. Because, he was a handsome guy. Like, I mean, not from the neck up, I guess. Maybe it's just the glasses. But, he's pretty ripped. He'd go out to the gay clubs and be like, just drug people and accidentally or unpurposely kill them or whatever. But the cops yelled at him, like, you're targeting the black community. And I'm not defending Jeffrey Dahmer, but I'm just thinking that when he said, no, I just was there because it's cheap, that was probably true. Like, he was just a piece of shit that couldn't hold a job. And he just went, what the hell does he care if he's in like a crazy dangerous neighborhood or whatever? He's like, I don't know, there's more gay bars there. And then he just kind of gets a boner for hot dudes. And in those areas, a lot of those hot dudes are black. And I think the people that he ate, the only real difference between them is the way society views his eating choices. And that's wrong of us to do that. Now, should we be saying that he shouldn't really be eating anybody? Well, again, no. It's like, if I can have an old-fashioned with a Percocet floating in it before work, you can eat a bowl of donuts. Jeffrey Dahmer can eat some dudes. I don't know. Or perhaps that whole thing is very faulty and flawed and full of catch-22s and full of it falls apart when you look at it real closely, like many ideologies are. And yeah, I shouldn't really be even able to make this joke, and I should say that's what it is, about Jeffrey Dahmer being food neutral because he ate people of all races. He just ate locally, farm to table, like he would just go out and source his own meat. He was a pretty progressive guy, I think, and that's so fucking mean. And again, maybe he was racist, but in the movie, they really did seem to go out of their way to point out that he's just like, what? I wasn't doing anything on purpose. And I really think that was like the truth. I think he was like too stupid to do whatever. I mean, even like Ted Bundy, when they looked at him, everyone's like, oh, he's so handsome. He was such a handsome man, and he fooled and romanced these ladies. But I think the reality of that is just that society kind of pressured or molded women into being, helpful and courteous and whatever. So it's like, and then it's like, to the point where they probably would have helped someone really scary and then, got thrown into the back of his car or whatever. But like, yeah, just on top of that, Ted Bundy was handsome enough. But the guy was a bonehead. Like, if you watch those court things, I mean, for one thing, he represented himself. That's just proven idiocy. It's like he might have gotten out on some technicality. I'm sure. I haven't watched anything about Ted Bundy in a while. He probably has gotten out on technicalities, a bunch of times until they like finally got him or whatever. And, the Dahmer thing, it also does really, and again, the reason that I like it is like all the horrible stuff doesn't really faze me, except for the pacing. I will admit it's so realistically slow and awkward to match real life that it's hard to deal with. And they skip through time a bunch. So they show him as like a kid and like why he's fucked up, and they show him doing fucked up things. And some people bitched about that. They're like, well, yeah, but you shouldn't be making him whatever, relatable or like excusable or whatever like that. I'm like, I don't think that's what they're doing. I think that it is a really harsh reality that you don't just get to pick and choose when you're like, oh, I fucking like ruined this party but something triggering happened. I was traumatized. Like, I have to do this. Or some fucking asshole being like, I voted for Trump and punched my wife because my dad hit me. And that's just what we do. That's their way of saying that they're suffering from intergenerational trauma and whatever. But I mean, yeah, that stuff exists, and it's very important to note. It doesn't mean we excuse things, but it means we have to look at it even with Jeffrey Dahmer and be like, well, he just fell out of the sky and he was evil. That's bad thinking, by the way. That is thinking that had Christian people burning people at the stake. It's like, some people are just evil. It's like, yeah, that guy that stabbed somebody because you're putting cigarettes out on him your whole life, and then when people ask you, it's like, I don't know, I guess they're accusing me of being a bad mother, but I was good to him. And just calling, like, making him wear a dress and hitting him and stuff and molesting him. I don't know. But that's how reality works. Hurt people hurt people. That's just the fucking way it is. And to go, yeah, but that only counts if you're someone on Tumblr who's, you know, really rude all the time because you had a rough childhood. We have to forgive them. And this guy eats people because his mom is a psychopath. It's like, yeah, we're not forgiving him either, but that is like what happened. We have to see that. I don't know. And if you don't like that, don't watch it. It's very fascinating how picky people are. Like, people, and I guess, you know, I sort of understand this, but the Jeffrey Dahmer story did have however, it's tagged on Netflix as like an LGBTQ story, and everyone's like, no, that doesn't count. I'm like, yeah, I guess. I mean, you want to be represented in a good light, but see, I don't know, it's a thing. I like representation, but I do think that we should really just represent everything if that's what we're going to do. Be like, this is what it was like. And maybe it's not about him. Maybe it's about how scary it was to be a gay dude going to hook up at a gay club back when there was AIDS and the police would just beat you up and whatever, like that kind of shit. Like, there was guys in the movie that were like, you know, some friend of theirs disappeared having like nothing to do with Jeffrey Dahmer. Like, did he get gay bashed? We're like, we don't know. Like, that was just part of their life. And if that isn't the roots, and I'm being serious right now, I think there's a lot of people running around being like, I have green hair and my boyfriend is my partner, not a, you know, blah, blah, blah. I'm some sort of weird fancy thing that doesn't mean anything. And fine. But, like, the thing you got to remember is there's not really anyone that's out to kill you. You know what I mean? Like, if you're a lady and you're like, yeah, but I don't count as one. You know, my husband and I have a child, and the child will decide what it is later and all that. But like, all you are is a white family in a house. I mean, fine. But, like, no one is like, ooh, I can't stand how those do. Like, you have to try to find something to be like, no, we're different. Try to kill us. So that way we could be in solidarity with everyone else. I think that folks are getting a little too young now to remember that being just like a gay dude at a certain point was fucking extremely dangerous. And the Dahmer thing shows that. It's like, pretty like right up to the thing, you might get eaten by Jeffrey Dahmer. Like, that was the risk you ran. And then when the cops are like, you know, get called or whatever, they might just be like, yeah, whatever, bunch of gay dudes doing gay shit. We don't give no fuck. Jeffrey Dahmer even did that in the thing. He would answer the door and freak the cops out. Be like, what? Why was this bloody guy running down the hallway screaming? And he said he was in your apartment or whatever. It's like, oh, you know, we were just doing gay stuff. And they just didn't want to even really go in and look around until eventually they finally do, because it's just so blatant or whatever. But yeah, like, that really happened. And something bugs me about how everyone was like, we don't want that series listed under LGBTQ stuff. And I'm like, I think that maybe it's just because it's like fucked up and scary and gross, but you know, reality is. But it's like, we don't want to be represented like that. I'm like, no, I don't know. I think the people that complain about this stuff the most are almost the people that are embarrassed or something that they didn't live through any real, like, oh, their parents were mean to them, because they're like, well, so was everyone's for like no reason. But no, they're like, there were people that lived on the fucking edge. Like, there was this actual terrible, like, yeah, COVID, whatever. Like, AIDS back when there was like no treatments for it was one of the worst ways to die. And it was everywhere. It was a real big actual problem. And it really, like, you know, school made it seem like we were all going to get AIDS or whatever. But, you know, in the gay and black community, it was just completely rampant. And it's like when bad stuff happened, like nobody cared. And so it was just allowed to go completely out of control. It was honestly really scary. And people would just get beaten to death and the cops would be like, yeah, one less of those. Great. Like, that was a real thing. And I think there's people out there that want that erased a little bit so their fake pretend, you know, oppression carries a little bit more weight. I don't know. That's pretty insidious. I don't really want to accuse anyone of actually doing that. And if they are, it might be subconscious. It might be one of those things where it's like, no one is really doing that. No one is like, we don't want to see this story and we're going to make up kind of a flimsy excuse as to how it's like, oh, we don't want to be represented like that or whatever. But maybe there could be. Hang on, we're getting towards the end. I got to finish my drinks and smoke. But, you know, I want to say, like, Meredith kind of cautioned me, like, you know, do you really want to conflate and make fun of the whole food neutrality because it's racist or whatever, like, you know, telling people not to eat lifesavers instead of vegetables or whatever. It's like, it's racist, whatever. You know, maybe don't conflate that with Jeffrey Dahmer because, you know, he kind of famously preyed on the black community, but I don't know. Like, I think there's an important, and it's, again, this isn't like a polished stand-up comedy thing. This is like a musing while drunk, whatever. It's like Harry Connick Jr.'s set last night. I'm just kind of winging it and phoning it in like I always am. But there is some kind of connection between those two things. Even if it's just broadly sort of the, I don't know, the oppression Olympics bumping up against the reality of like a real scary time in history, especially for a certain group of people or whatever. And being like, well, we don't want to be associated with this, even though it's like, you know, it's like we only want to talk about this kind of thing when it comes to like Freddie Mercury or something because it's so like beautiful and wonderful. And he got, you know, fucked over by AIDS. And it's the same thing where it's like, if nobody cared, it was like Ronald Reagan was like, it's just some gay disease or whatever. It doesn't affect anybody else. Or like they didn't want to research it or anything like that. And, you know, it was bad times. And there's a real error. There's bad things going on right now. Like I said, like the very same type of thing where people who wanted to sell twice as many drinking fountains were pushing for segregation which is bad no matter what, but their reasoning behind it wasn't even this broken ideology. It was just, we want to sell more toilets. Like if that's not, you have to know that right now, that exact same thing is behind everything. It's not just behind maybe something. That concept of pushing a bunch of fucked up rules or laws or ideas just because you're trying to sell something, it's not the exception, it's the goddamn rule. And the part of me that's very keen to sort of ferret that out or notice that or whatever really does feel like people going like, oh, this Jeffrey Dahmer movie, it's not representation. It's not, you know, it's not representation of people of colors, depressed communities in the 90s in certain cities and of gay people and stuff or whatever like that. But it's like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if you should look at that movie as being some sort of bad thing when it comes to that. It's like pretty damning evidence of whatever, like the status quo being a nightmare, like them just not like any of the black people that were going again, like, hey, I think there's like something really bad happening, like, you know, having to do with this guy. And then that guy, just because he's like white and mumbly, gets the benefit of the doubt just for no reason. He's just kind of like, I don't know, I wasn't doing anything. They're like, well, it's good enough for me, son. And they just leave. And shit's still like that right now. And that's bad. And it's so strange to me that the hot take on that series is that it's bad racially and it's bad representation of gay stuff. It's holding a mirror up to the true horrors of those things. Like, I don't know what people want. Maybe they just hate the guy that directed it, and it's like, he shouldn't be making things about stuff. But what's behind that thought? I mean, for one, I'm just basing this shit off of things I've read on the internet or whatever. Like, you know, like, no one I've met is like, I think that the Jeffrey Dahmer, you know, again, it's like 5 people on Twitter is probably who I'm actually complaining about here, and no one's going to remember it or whatever. And I could definitely understand an honest bad review of that movie or series or whatever. It's a long movie like they all are. Because, yeah, it's kind of agonizingly slow, and it is a bit of a... Like, there was an episode that was really hard for me because he actually was making a bit of a connection with another guy. I'll be incredibly vague here. Obviously, it doesn't go good. So, I mean, you know, spoiler. But, yeah, I won't say exactly which situation it was. And you know it's going to go bad the whole time. And you're like, maybe this will be different. But you know it isn't. You know how this all goes. It was on the news forever. And it's like this big, famous, terrifying serial killer thing. In the old 90s Saturday Night Live news cycle or whatever. But yeah, that was actually incredibly heart-wrenching. But again, it was also very realistic because, you know, how many guys like that guy who is, you know, maybe making a bit of a real connection with Jeffrey Dahmer or whatever, how many stories like that do not become movies of the week and documentaries and all that or whatever? And like, you know, and not that everything needs to be that, but how many of those are just a mystery? You know, like, how many times was some, you know, dude looking for love, but he was looking for it with, like, another dude in a time when that was, like, really fucked up because it could cause you to die. And it did. It's like any of those same things. Like you meet somebody and, like, you take for granted now. You know, you meet someone and you're like, oh, yeah, I'm going to go have coffee with them and maybe go back to their place. And it's like the worst thing you're probably going to get is HPV. And who cares? But... You know, if you were a gay guy back then, it's like, yeah, you don't fucking, like, your family, even if they knew you were out, they're just like, well, any minute now, like, one of these weekends, we're never going to hear from him again. And we're never going to really know what it was. And maybe it's better not to know. And maybe that's it. Maybe everybody that is mad that this movie's out is like, you know, do we really need to, like, hear about this over and over again? But I don't know. Like, this is the most earnest you've probably ever seen me on this thing. I'm really thinking about this, like, really hard. This actually isn't leading up to an amazing mocking joke where I cut the thing off mid-sentence or whatever. Honestly, maybe after some time goes by, you know, they're not going to show it in school like Roots or whatever, but the Jeffrey Dahmer thing will be, like, an important... Like, this is what this is really like. And I know you could be like, well, maybe Bohemian Rhapsody should be the example. I'm like, it's just not... It's not gritty and scary and violent and dirty enough because, you know, the reality of all that stuff was that, yeah, you know, getting killed by Jeffrey Dahmer because you went home with some guy, it's like, was it, like... It wasn't even that much. It was just a famous case because he ate people and it was bad. There's really plenty of people that just got killed and left by the side of the road where it was like, yeah, it's just as bad, but we've never heard about it. And I think that's the thing. It's not that it's important that we necessarily hear about it every time or whatever, but it's important to note, again, like I was saying earlier, that, you know, like everything being a scam just for money, that's the rule and not the exception. Well, yeah, in that subculture at that time, running into some sort of cannibal serial killer or whatever, that wasn't the exception. That wasn't the like, well, weird that this happened one time. No, it was just how everything worked back then. The cops didn't give a shit. Like, everyone would just rather that you were dead anyway. Like, yeah, it was a horrible, fucked up mess. And I think to go, oh, yeah, well, you know, shit like that happens, and we really shouldn't glorify it and focus on it so much. Like, I don't know. I think it should really be common knowledge of how bad all that was. And I don't know. Again, maybe part of the importance I put on it is because, yeah, there are people with a little bit too much time on their hands that have had a little bit too good for too long now that I almost think they don't want us to remember. You know, like, oh, people actually had to go through real shit, and I'm just going through imaginary shit, and I want attention, and I want to be special. And people have tried to kill me. Have they? Well, I mean... Someone left a negative comment on one of my makeup tutorials once, and I mean, that's basically violence, and it's like that whole thing stays very valid if we ignore the real, gritty, terrifying, bloody realities of what life was like for some people back then, and probably will be again as society slowly circles the toilet, as the state fair gets too crowded ever to go to again, as the Renaissance Festival becomes a Trump rally. I think at some point we'll be lucky if someone who is food neutral chooses us as a meal.
The Reverend John Wheeler podcast takes zero responsibility for the words, actions, or ideas of its host, guests, or listeners. Though the people on the screen may at times be speaking directly to you and may occasionally give you direct calls to action, neither Reverend John nor the Alchemical Cocktail Lounge are under any moral or legal obligation to answer for the potentially disastrous repercussions that may arise if you are stupid enough to actually follow the orders of a raving lunatic. Think for yourself and do whatever you want, because you're on your own. If anyone ever tries to sue this podcast, black SUVs will converge on your location in the darkness of night and you will never be seen again. Remember to like and subscribe.